India is the suicide capital of the world.
That's right.
We're the most depressed country in the world.
Yes. Sadly, bullying is said to be as debilitating or sad for a person as sexual abuse. This whole quest for perfection is actually a huge mental health trap. It's human to feel angry. It's human to feel sad. It's human to compare yourself. But as long as you're aware, you're acknowledging it, and you're not bottling it up. That is the difference between you being human or you getting into a mental health issue.
Welcome to Voices in My Head with Yameer Adhar. Today my guest is Parul Khanna Parashar.
Hi.
Parul is a psychologist.
That's right.
She is a humanitarian.
Yes.
She is a director at Sanjivni Society for Mental Health, which is this amazing NGO that provides free mental health services to anyone who needs them. And my personal opinion is she's a workaholic. So Parul, welcome.
Thank you, Yameer. Thank you.
Thank you for taking out the time. I know how precious your time is.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here today.
So I wanted to start by something that I didn't mention in your introduction, is that you studied at the London School of Economics.
That's right.
And post that, you went on to work for companies like Tata Consultancy Services and Sapient.
That's right.
Which are multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. I mean, people would give an arm and a leg to work with them. So how does someone like that, from a corporate world and studied from LSE, now turn to psychology and helping people and helping them with their mental health issues? How did that transformation happen? And that's something that's, very interesting to me personally.
I started working in the corporate sector. I was in human resources for about 12 years. But, as the years progressed, initially the money, the travel, was very exciting. But after some time, I realized that, it's just, I'm feeling like I'm such a cog in the system. If I were to disappear from any of the places I work with, I could be replaced in a second and nobody would even notice. And I think this awareness came that I do truly want to do something where what I do matters, where what I do makes a difference, and where I feel stimulated. So then I realized that, the money part I can probably live with lesser means, but I truly have to not just survive, I have to really enjoy my life. I have to do something that makes me feel excited. So that's where the shift happened. But if I look back, if I were to rewind my life, I was kind of going against my calling and doing something that I was truly probably not interested in.
So, this is an area in which I'd like to believe I know perhaps a little bit more than the average person, but I'm still a layman. And I consider that myself to be a layman.
And so am I. We are learning every day. Every day we are learning.
So I wanted to ask you that, can you just explain to me, I mean, I've always, and I never get this right, is what is the difference between a psychologist and there's a clinical psychologist, and then there's the word shrink is thrown around. There are these 2-3 types of different kinds of people who deal with mental health issues, and perhaps someone who looks at brain scans and if you go and you get an MRI or of your brain or something like that. I mean, what is the difference really between these different categories of professionals?
So see, it totally depends on the degree that you have. So a psychiatrist is a doctor. This is what is called a shrink, a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist can actually prescribe medication. So if somebody is living with depression or somebody's got anxiety, maybe, there is some chemical imbalance in their system which is leading to them to feel a particular way. So a psychiatrist is a person, a doctor who prescribes medication to deal with those symptoms. A psychologist is a person who, helps you to go back into helps you to cope with, your problems and to understand and for you to find the inner strength to cope with your problems. And it's also somebody who can do personality tests. It's also somebody who can, perform various therapies depending on what the nature of the problem is. A counselor is as important in the mental health profession, and a counselor may or may not have a degree. but they're trained in, counseling, in a particular method of counseling. So again, and their strength is also that they help you find the inner strength to cope with your problems. So I think the difference between a psychologist and a counselor is one with a degree who's actually studied, the psychology as a subject in their academics, whereas a counselor has maybe learnt more on the job and in the particular organization that they are working in.
So I would go to a counselor or a psychologist first, and then if my condition is perhaps more complicated that they think the patient requires medication or something, then I'd go to
A psychiatrist. Well, it
psychiatrist.
could be either way. So if the symptoms are very stark, so if a person has suddenly irregular eating patterns, they're eating too much or too little, irregular sleep patterns, sleeping too much or too little, they are feeling very anxious, they're not being able to concentrate at all, the working at school, college, workplace, wherever is severely affected, or maybe they're even seeing hallucinations. So when the symptoms are very stark, it may be best to first go to a psychiatrist. Although there's such stigma associated with going to a psychiatrist,
absolutely, yes.
that probably a person may feel more comfortable going to a counselor or psychologist, and then a lot of times we give referrals to go to a psychiatrist, because it's like, if you think of it, it's like if your leg is broken, you need physiotherapy definitely, but you need to get your leg put in a cast first. Right? So it's like that.
And this whole space of mental health, what is actually mental health? Because this word is now, coming up more and more. How do you? I'm not asking you to define it, the textbook definition, but for for a layman like myself.
So how I like to think of it is that it's not just the absence of disease, but it's functioning up to your optimum capacity emotionally and mentally. So it's not to say that just because you don't have a mental illness doesn't mean you are in robust mental health. It's when you are functioning to your best capacity, and you have found healthy ways of coping. So it's not like because you're mentally healthy, you're not going to feel sad, angry, irritated, jealous. No. Those are regular, natural human emotions we all feel. But perhaps you will be aware of those emotions, you will understand your triggers, and you will be able to cope with them in a healthy and appropriate way.
And when we say that, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling anxious, I mean, most of the times, I was someone who was depressed and anxious for years, and I didn't even know it, because how do I know that I'm depressed? And what is depression really? And I think that's one of the main problems that we all have, is that we don't know if we're really depressed or, is it just a off day?
And these terms are used so loosely. So depressed could be anything. It could be that a person is feeling sad, irritated, unhappy, or in the more medical ways, depression is, like I said, some chemical imbalance or something in your life, which could be a combination of biological, environmental, or any factors which is making you feel, which is making you lose interest in your regular activities, which is making you not want to eat or eat too much, not wanting to sleep too much, not wanting to maybe even groom yourself.
And I feel it's more hopeless than ever, because unfortunately I read a few days ago that India is the suicide capital of the world.
That's right.
We're the most depressed country in the world.
Yes.
How did this happen, or why is it happening in particular to us, or is it a global phenomenon?
See, it is global. I think, a WHO report that I read recently says that, 1 in 4 people could have some sort of a mental illness.
In the world?
In the world, yeah. So, some sort. I mean, there are various,
Of course.
There's a continuum. But in India, there was a report in, I think NIMHANS did some report that 1 in 20 people could be, going through something, and it's not, it could be a mental illness. So, there are all these statistics floating around, but the reality is that, like you said, India, the number of suicides in India are really high. And world over, people are choosing to...
Do we know why in India they're
so,
high?
Yeah, I think when we... what I attribute it to is that earlier, when maybe I was growing up, not so much you're much younger, but even before me, or maybe when I was growing up, there was a much more cohesive family system. You had somebody in your family that you could turn to if you were feeling sad or lonely. Now there's been a breakup of the joint family system. Families are more nuclear in nature. There's a mother, there's a father, maybe both are busy. There's more materialism. So there's this, we all strive to, to improve ourselves financially. So in all this, in all these aspirations, in all this, maybe, the connection with each other is getting lost. And that is why we just don't know who to turn to when we are feeling a certain way. And when and if it is arrested at that point, then it would not lead to suicide. But when a person commits suicide, it's because they're feeling so hopeless, so worthless, so unhappy, that they really are not seeing any choices.
But therein lies the other problem, because especially in India, okay, why is mental health such a taboo subject? I mean, I can go to my parents and say, I've got asthma, or I've got, I'm not feeling well, I've got fever, I've got dengue, I've got anything. But if I go and say that I'm depressed or anxious or I've got some sort of mental health issue, it's suddenly taboo, and it just can't happen to us, and it's something that's brushed under the carpet. And I think that's another reason why a lot of perhaps parents could have prevented their kids from committing suicide, or acting out, or going through severe issues, but they didn't, because either they were in denial, or they didn't, or they weren't educated enough about it. So why is it so taboo, as I'm saying?
There's so much stigma attached, like you said yourself, that now when I have clients, they are willing to seek counseling, but they're not willing to take medication. And it's because of that taboo, that, or the myths around medication, or the myths that I will be called pagal. This medication will make me is addictive in nature. I'll get addicted. And also that these things don't happen to us. These happen to people in other homes or in the West, because as Indians we take care of each other.
And I want to just come back to something you were saying about medication. Like, even someone like myself, I am all about natural cures, and because that's what I did. I managed to cure my asthma naturally, and my depression and anxiety with whole load of things that I do, and that's become my life now. So even if I would be someone hesitant to take medication as well. So, and pharmaceuticals in this area, in mental health, are we just talking about mood enhancing, perhaps stuff like, which I've heard is Prozac kind of stuff, or are we talking about some serious medication from that aspect? And why I ask you that is because a lot of people that I've spoken to in India, there's this impression, whatever it is, even if it's from a cold to a normal infection, it's the doctors here just pump you with medication. The same illness, like my son just got the flu, and the doctor's given him a 7-day course of, and he's 2.5. He's given him a 7-day course of antibiotics. So there is this, and that would have never happened if I was in, we were in summer, I was in London, and he got something similar, and the doctor was like, when I said, does he need antibiotics? He said, are you crazy? We don't prescribe antibiotics, and that's why there's so much antibiotic resistance in India. So I've digressed from, I'm using antibiotics as a point.
Yeah, but
even the mental health people I've spoken to who've been to doctors, who've been prescribed medication, their feedback was that they over-medicated us. They medicated the hell out of us, actually. So
see, I'm not a doctor, so I can't comment on what doctors prescribe, or I'm not a psychiatrist. But I have seen that for a lot of people, the medication does help, because their quality of life is so deteriorated by the time they come to a psychologist. Sleep, mood, loss of interest, etc. So it does help them. And it's a myth that it's going to be lifelong. It's for maybe 6 months, 4 months, 3 months most often. And then, of course, if it's a serious mental illness, like maybe say schizophrenia, then you have to live with taking medication all your life, almost like a diabetes.
Okay.
When you get diabetes, you do have to take medication, insulin all your life.
Right.
Having said that, now more and more, even the government of India in the Mental Health Act recognizes what's called Ayush,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani,
Yes.
Siddha, holistic health. So more and more in the world, there's a movement towards lifestyle choices, which is exercise, sleep, nutrition. So you cannot undermine the importance of these. So like you said in your case,
Yeah, this is exactly how I've turned my
you
life
know,
around. Now you're saying sleep, lifestyle, and nutrition, and that makes me think of people in the corporate world where you come
Yes,
from,
yes.
and you're the perfect person to discuss mental health and the corporate world because they're like two opposites.
Yes.
And is it all this the lifestyle issues and the way corporates are living their lives?
Yes.
Your husband is a corporate,
Yes.
so you continue to have an insight into that field.
Yeah, so if
And-
I take you, I'll give you my husband's example, okay? He is all these things. He barely is able to sleep. But yes, I think what makes him mentally healthy or resilient is that he's very, very particular about his exercise. And also just this resilience, inner strength that he seems to have, which so far has worked well for him. For example, moving forward, who knows? So it's not to say that just because you're feeling mentally healthy right now, things may not change for you later. But yes, by and large, corporates in India and maybe world over, sleep is deprived. The lifestyle doesn't really allow you to exercise too much. So you really have to take a conscious decision, about what your choices in life are going to be.
And nutritionally, of course, they eat
eat whatever, do
whenever they want, I guess.
But even there are people who are taking care of
Yes,
themselves.
of course, yeah.
So yes, sometimes circumstances are not very supportive of you living a particular life. But like in the place where I work, I had this younger colleague one day, and I said to her, "What happened to you? You didn't come yesterday." She'd messaged me, "I'm not feeling well," and she said, "You know what? My mental health I wasn't feeling good. So I just decided to take the day off." And for a second, with my corporate background, I was kind of thrown off that, how do I respond to this? My mental health wasn't good. And then I really became aware that even me, with my education, with my exposure, I'm kind of judging this person who's very openly told me. So am I giving importance to the mental health of my colleagues and peers? So that, so I'm really grateful to that person for kind of for helping me realize that that's just, me in this profession. I have to check myself to think differently.
So we were discussing mental health in the corporate world, and you've given this beautiful example about your colleague and how you yourself
was judging.
After all your education
Yes,
and being in this space, and sometimes you just forget.
Yeah. But what's the difference, Yameer, is that you are aware. You're going to be I am always going to be a human who feels everything anyone else feels. But the only difference, I hope, is that I am more aware of what I feel. And that's really it. So it's not like, sometimes people tell me, if I get angry, my family members tell me, "Oh, you're a counselor, you're a psychologist, how are you getting angry?" And I'm like, it's a human emotion. I'm going to get angry. It's just that I'm going to be more aware of why I got angry, what my triggers are. It's almost like saying a doctor won't fall sick. Is that possible? It's exactly like that,
But with awareness comes it's the issue, because you're not aware of your own feelings, and then how do you seek help if you're not aware? And even if I am aware, okay, what's the first step to seeking help? How does one do this?
So, seeking help is sometimes it's as simple as reaching out to a friend or family member that you can really trust, whom you think will not judge you, whom you think will really listen to you and not just hear you. So that is your first, person. If you think that there's no such person in your space, where you feel safe, that's when you go out and you speak to a psychologist or a counselor.
And you mentioned counseling, so I just remembered our school counselor. We used to have a position. There used to be a teacher who used to be called the school counselor, but unfortunately, I never knew what she did. What was her job? I mean, what is the counselor's job? And now there's so much going on, and schools have like mandatory counseling sessions with every child. But I wish we had something like that, because for me, the janitor was more superior to the counselor. I mean, no offense, because I knew exactly
a
what the
clear job
janitor's job
description.
was, but I didn't know what the counselor's job was. And if anyone had told me, and I wish they did, that, if you have any issues, if you're feeling a certain way, just go speak to the counselor, she's there for you. And that would have been kind of a stepping stone into just somebody examining my mental health who was detached, who didn't have the stigma of, the parent trying to protect, or the parent trying to be in denial.
Yeah.
So I wish someone had told me that. And just the way we test these kids on, do they know, Pythagoras theorem, and what was the year of independence of XYZ, and this battle date. Why aren't, I mean, mental health should be something you need to clear before you move on to the next class, and that will even force the parents to if not wake up, I mean, unfortunately, it's, this system of carrot and stick, in which, like, you have to pass this grade, you have to get a 40% to pass. It should be your child's mental health has to be at this level, and that will get everybody involved. In fact, that should be it's a good recommendation to the government, that there should be a mental health, like, I don't know,
a checklist,
like
some personality
PE,
test,
or PT, physical training is what we used to have, and you had to get a B in that, and but that was also a bit of a hogwash, because it was just that you did it and you went on with it. So counselors. So what are your thoughts on the school counselors, and the issues, and more young people are in trouble today, and that's really disturbing.
Absolutely. So counseling, it's a wonderful new addition, counselors to schools, and I'm hoping that they are now more proactive than they were back in the day, maybe when you were growing up. When I was growing up, there was nothing called a school counselor. So at least it seems to have progressed. And now, at least in the in the bigger schools in Delhi, perhaps, they are more active. They reach out to children more. Having said that, I've personally met a lot of adult survivors of bullying. They are maybe in their 20s, 30s, late teens. And, sadly, bullying is said to be is as debilitating or sad for a person as sexual abuse, because there's a lot of stigma attached to it. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of hopelessness and helplessness, which is the same as for sexual abuse. But it's not recognized as something big enough for people to focus on. I mean, of course, now again things are changing. But yes, bullying is rampant, and its effects are rampant well into adulthood.
I totally agree with that, and that's because every time I'm staring in the mirror and I'm obsessing about my weight, and my wife is like, "What's wrong with you? You're really skinny." And I keep trying to explain to her, if you've been through school as a fat kid or an overweight kid like I was close to 100 kilos at my peak weight. I said, in my mind, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, and I'm very happy with my life, and I don't have any image issues. But in my mind, I'll always be a fat kid that needs to be careful about how I look after my body. And that was all about. It was about bullying, because if you have gone through school being fat, you have had it.
Yeah.
You have had it, and then I can say that with full experience.
I believe. Yes, I believe you, Yameer. I hear you.
And you're associating it with, and you know this with the stigma of being bullied with sexual assault. That's something that I wasn't aware of, and that's frightening, actually.
It is because basically it is that you're not good enough. You're left feeling rejected. You're left feeling inadequate. You're left feeling I'm not good enough, and that comes out in every area of your life. As if you're not aware, if you've not worked on yourself, it comes out in relationships. It comes out at work. It comes out at school. This feeling of I'm not good enough. So the impact could be that you'll not go out of your comfort zone in the fear you don't want to face that rejection. You might avoid certain social interactions. You might isolate yourself. You might make different life choices which are not beneficial to you, because deep down you're feeling I'm not good enough. I'm not worth it.
And back in the day, when we went to school, including you, it was physical bullying. Somebody slapped you or said something to you.
Yes.
But now there's this whole physical and virtual world of
Yes.
bullying. There's
Yes.
being bullied on social media has become a huge
I believe so.
issue.
Yes.
So this issue is just getting compounded, and
Yes.
with little solutions. And I think as parents, we're all struggling. So what can I do as a parent? or as a millennial parent, to prevent this from happening, to protect my kids, or to recognize, or as a lay person to be able to help anyone, not just my kids, but
So I think the first thing is connection, to have that connection going with your child where you're able to, um, you're able to make the child feel that his or her feelings matter, that they are valued, and they're just not a sum of their achievements, of their appearance. So that connection is key. And also to be aware, like, if my child doesn't do well in school, for example, immediately I start feeling inadequate as a parent, that maybe
exactly,
I
yeah.
didn't spend enough time with her teaching her, maybe I didn't find a good tutor for her, and I start going back to my times when that inadequacy is stirred. And then I have to get back into being aware that, my child is more than her grades, and I have to work on myself. So I think if I go back, it's not before connection, is also actually awareness, self awareness as a parent. Am I trying to cover up my inadequacies through my child? Is my child going to be that person whom I could not be or I wanted to be? So it happens to me also. I mean, I'm sure it happens to a lot of parents, but I'm constantly guilty of, of trying to, like, for my child not to repeat the mistakes that I made in my life.
But is there one thing that you can recommend I can do as a parent? Only if,
Be self aware, I think. That's my journey. That I'm no expert on this, but this is my journey, that I want to be self aware when I am making my child not feel that she's good enough for who she is. I'm self aware that I'm not trying to live my life through my child. I'm self aware that I do what I have to do in my lifetime with myself and not make my child do what I couldn't do. I think that would be a path that I would recommend.
And one of the things, and we've been reading as new parents, and I try to read some books on better parenting. And initially, being first-time parents, we were extremely hyper, and then
Yeah.
someone told me that parents end up transferring the anxiety
Anxiety
to
to
their
the child.
child. So if you're calm, the child will be calm. If you're not, the child kind of picks up those energies, and
Absolutely.
it's just an extension of you.
Yeah.
So they also become anxious. They also become the same
Yes.
way. And that got me to thinking. I mean, we've heard this forever. Alcoholism is genetic, and other diseases are genetic, which I can debate that. I don't exactly agree with certain things because of certain things that I've been reading and educating myself about. Is it genetic? I mean, if my father or grandfather or great grandfather was a depressive and anxious, am I more likely to be?
I mean, it's also nature versus nurture. So you've got probably, or I've got that biological, element, but it's also the way I'm raised. If there are other positive figures in my life, if I've had a chance to, to do things that have added to my self-esteem, then maybe not. But it's case to case. There may be two children in the same house who go through exactly the same. Like, I've heard this story which I actually like to narrate, and I hope I can recall and narrate it properly. But it's basically about twins brothers whose father was an alcoholic, and one brother had a very he became an alcoholic. He had a very troubled life, and he self-destructed in many ways. And the other brother became very successful. He had a happy family life. He was able to achieve financially. He was able to take care of his family. And when they were asked, what the difference was, so the one of them said, it's because my father was an alcoholic. And guess what? The other one was asked, why are you so successful despite your circumstances? And he said, oh, because my father was an alcoholic. So it's not the event, it's the reaction to the event.
What do you make of it?
Yeah, what you make of it. So we always say that, two people going through the same event, it's not the event, it's how you've chosen to react to that event. And through counseling, you can work on that reaction.
And in terms of, you've just given us some tips for, I mean, how to, be self-aware as a parent, and that perhaps it's not genetic, and this beautiful story of these two people who had an alcoholic father. But in terms of, is there a way to prevent mental illness? I mean, does it exist? That can I just, it's not, is it possible to set up perfect circumstances that XYZ person will never develop mental illness. Is that possible?
It's, well, you know what you can do to, again, like in physical fitness, how do you protect yourself from disease? Well, you choose a certain lifestyle, you sleep on, you have an adequate sleep pattern, adequate nutrition, exercise. So hopefully that gives you the immunity that if and when a disease hits you, you will have more immunity. Same way with mental health. You develop patterns, the same like with physical health, sleep, nutrition, exercise. In addition, a caring support system that you feel you can be yourself with. Even if there's that one person you don't feel judged by, you can talk about your feelings. And then the other thing that I feel really helps is what are the messages you're giving yourself, the self-talk that you're having with yourself. Are you acknowledging your emotions? Like I said before, it's human to feel angry, it's human to feel sad, it's human to compare yourself. But as long as you're aware, you're acknowledging it, and you're not bottling it up, that is the difference between you being human or you getting into a mental health issue.
And if I keep myself physically fit, the chances of me kind of protecting myself from mental issues are
higher, definitely. It gives you more immunity.
And vice versa.
And
if I keep
vice
myself
versa.
mentally fit, I don't know, by doing yoga and some other practices, I
Absolutely.
can.
It gives you more immunity, Yameer. That if and when faced with a stressful life situation, you will react to it differently. You will, of course, feel what any human being will feel, but you will come out of it, okay.
So just the way you lift weights to break the muscle, actually, to make it a little stronger. So you similarly make your mind stronger by being a little more resilient and doing practices that are going to build the mental muscles,
Yes.
perhaps.
I think you put it in a very wonderful way. That would be a good analogy.
And whatever you do there's nothing easy about it. So I want to ask you a tough question now. And I know there are hundreds of ways to do it, but what if I had to make one change in my life today for my mental health, or if the people listening, watching have to make one change, what would you recommend that they do? What's some actionable advice today, right now? What can I do?
I think I need to start being, or I always tell people if they ask me this, that start being kind to yourself. The kind of kindness you show to your best friend, to somebody you care about, start showing the same kindness to yourself. And don't have unrealistic expectations of yourself. I think that to me is key. That this whole quest for perfection is actually a huge mental health trap. And don't hold yourself to those impossible standards. So I don't know if that's actionable. It's easier said than done. But be aware that,
And be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself. That is key.
Wow, this has been a great chat. I'm so glad you took out the time to come here.
Thank you for calling me, Yameer.
How does one get in touch with you? If somebody wants to get in touch with you for a session, or can they find you on social media? Can they contribute to your cause, the NGO you work for, if they want to make a donation?
Okay.
How do they do all that now?
So my personal email ID is parulkhanna@hotmail.com. If somebody wants to reach out to me personally, that's where they could. I work in this organization called Sanjivni Society for Mental Health. I'm the director there, and I'm also a counselor. If they want to donate to Sanjivni, we have a website, and they can donate. But more than financial donation, what would really help us is if you feel that you're cut out for this kind of work, you like listening to people, you like helping people, please come volunteer with us. We have a wonderful volunteer intake program, which we have orientation sessions every year in November and December. So come attend those sessions. Come see if this is the kind of work that appeals to you. This is a commitment that you can make. And please volunteer with us, because while we have no dearth of people reaching out to us for counseling, we really do have a dearth of volunteers willing to do this kind of work free of cost.
Right, so they can come and learn how to become a counselor.
Yes. So we have we have a very extensive. If they make it to if we do take them as counselors, because there is you have to have an aptitude for this kind of work, and the way we test in Sanjivni, we test this aptitude is through a written test. Then there is a group discussion and an interview. So once a person makes it through this, there's a 6-month training program, which is a combination of classroom and experiential on-the-job training. So after 6 months, once you complete this training, is when a person is ready to be a counselor.
So that was my discussion with lovely Parul here, and I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. Thank you for tuning into Voices in My Head with Yameer Adhar, and we'll see you next time.
Voices in My Head is created and hosted by Yameer Adhar. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. We disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may arise from any information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guests' qualifications or credibility. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.